Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. This week's guest is Jenny Matern. Jenny's a therapist here in Nashville that specializes in play therapy. When I reached out to her and asked if she'd like to appear on the show, she suggested taking advantage of a special perspective that not many guests had brought on so far. That of a professional therapist who happens to be single. Because of that, she chose a movie that slipped in under my radar when it was originally released, 2016's How to Be Single. So, to everyone out there who might currently be unattached, this episode is for you. Up in the club? Just broke up. I'm doing my own little thing. If you like it, you should have dimmed the lights, raised the curtain, and started the previews. Welcome to the theater.
So glad you could come.
I always like to start the show by asking my guests why therapy.
Yes.
Why did you get into this?
Yeah, and it's my favorite question, I think, and I like the way that you ask it. So I feel like we're constantly asked to, like, why did you become a therapist? Or, like, tell me about your story, which is great, and I love to tell that too. But I heard you ask it when with Emily Party's podcast. I was actually driving down the street from my office, and I heard you say, why therapy? And I was like, oh, I've never heard it asked that way. And I had this flash of, like, to be seen go across my mind, and I was like, what was that? Like, where did that come from? I've thought about that, but never in the context of why therapy. And so, of course, as we do, I started processing and analyzing myself, and really kind of playing back my story, and was like, oh my gosh, like, I became a therapist because of the experience of feeling seen in therapy. And then that's kind of been what I've wanted to provide for other people since
So you were a
then.
client.
Mm-hmm.
And then in your
Very brief
sessions,
Yeah.
you felt like for, I don't know, the first time or at least for a significant time that you were really seen and...
Well, and just the experience of the way that it was done. So I'd never been in therapy until I was 25. I was dating a guy at the time, and we were on separate pages. I was ready to take it to the next step, but he was very unsure. And I flippantly one day was like, I don't know what else to do. Like, let's just go to therapy, thinking like that would never happen. And I think he was, I don't want to speak for him, but was at such a place of not knowing that he was like, okay. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so we only did 3 sessions. We did one together, one apart. Took 2 weeks of like, hey, try not to talk about it to each other. Like, think about what you want. Let's come back and then figure out like what our goals are. And it's so funny because it feels, when I was reflecting back on my journey and the to be seen part, I was like, oh, I've always had these 2 distinct memories of our last session that we did together, which is ultimately where we broke up.
Wow, talk about brief therapy.
It was very brief there. Well, but that was the point. Like, we got to figure out if we're staying together or not. And we got there. But there were always these like 2 specific things, and I have a terrible memory, but 2 specific things that stood out to me. And so in the reprocessing of this.
Wait, I'm going to slow you down.
Yeah.
You don't have a terrible memory. You just recounted like 5 seasons of The Bachelor before we started recording.
Yeah.
You have an incredible memory.
What does that mean? Exactly. I'm not sure. I don't remember my past relationships, but I can tell you about The Bachelor's relationships. We can analyze that another time. Maybe off mic. But yeah, so it was like clearly, I think memories stand out to me when they connect with something else. And I realized that these 2 memories stood out to me because I felt so seen in a way that I never had before.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially we went into that last session and I knew the guy pretty well. We had been together for a long time. And I was like, I have a feeling I know where this is going. I'm really stubborn. I will not speak first. And so we sat in session. Therapist checked in. I did not speak first. And boyfriend at the time said, you know, I still don't know. And I go, I'm done. And like the words just kind of tumbled out. Probably not quite the way that I just said them then, but I said like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And the therapist looked at me, and my favorite line to this day, we all love it, right? But what I hear you saying is, it's the best therapist line there is. And he said, what I hear you saying is that you're shutting the door and you're closing the windows and everything's kind of locking up. And I was like, yeah. And I had said probably several times, like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, whatever. But it was the first time that my, like, again, just kind of flippant phrase was reflected back to me in a way of like, yeah.
Here's what it means when you're saying that.
Yeah, like that is what it means and what it needs to mean for both of us, really. And so having that experience of that, like, oh, like you get kind of what's happening internally for me, and you're helping me like bring that to the surface. And then pretty quickly after that, I looked at the clock and he goes, Jenny, I noticed you looking at the clock. And I was like, okay, I didn't say this out loud, but in my head, I was like, that's going to get annoying. Like, I move a lot. Are you going to analyze every movement? Because again, I'd never been in therapy before. But in that, reflecting back, I always joke that I'm the anti-therapist because I'm like, feelings are stupid and I hate them. That's the,
you can
like,
market that.
Yeah.
You better
The
trademark
anti-therapist there. I
Yeah.
tell all of my clients who come in here, I'm like, look, I hate this too, but I'm learning the value to like sitting with your feelings. So let's like trudge through that together. And I find that it's a pretty good joining tool. But especially at the time, I really was like, no emotions at all. Like, I didn't understand the value of them at that point. But when I looked at the clock, reflecting back now and like, why does that memory stand out? It's because I was scared.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that because he said, I see you looking at the clock, like, tell me about that. And I was like, ugh, God, ugh. And then I was like, I'm thinking we just broke up and we got 45 minutes to sit here still on this couch. And then we're going to walk back out into the real world. So that's what's going on in my head right now.
Did you guys drive there together?
No, we drove
Okay,
separately.
I was going to say,
we drove separately.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, we were very wise. Or like work schedules or whatever. Like I said, I think we both knew it was time.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of taking that step. But again, like to have somebody realize an emotion was happening that I didn't notice myself was happening, and to say, hey, this feels important, it needs to be named, even though it wasn't, he didn't go, you're scared, because I would have had all kinds of response to that. But giving space for me to say, here's what's about to happen. Huh? And what's funny is, again, I don't really remember any of we broke up, we went our separate ways after that. And I remember very little of what else was said. But the fact that those two were the things that stood out to me reflecting back, I was like, it's because I felt seen. Like somebody was hearing what I was saying. They were helping me figure out what I needed, ultimately probably what we both needed, and brought all of that to the surface and labeled that. And I think from birth to death, like that's what we're all looking for, right? Is to be seen and to be understood. And so from that moment, it was one of the hardest moments in my life that ultimately became the biggest, most important transition, because I fell in love with therapy at that point, and didn't really know it. I was also nannying full time at that point, which was great. It was a wonderful family and I loved it. But they were getting ready to be in school. The youngest was going to be going into kindergarten soon. And so I had kind of this like, okay, well, we're not getting married and I'm not going to be a stay-at-home mom anytime soon. And your kids are going to grow up and you're not going to need me full time. I'm 25 and I have no career. Like, what just happened? And that's just not that I think like you have to have it all figured out by 25, but for me,
but you got to pay the bills.
You got to pay the bills. Yeah. And the way that my personality was structured, I was like, how did I become this person anyways? You know, where I subconsciously had created this, you know, homemaker life story without thinking about anything else. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe take that part out. I don't know that I like that sentence. But it was this revelation of, I don't know what my future looks like and I need to figure that out. So call it God, call it the universe, whatever you choose to believe that it is. Again, things always happen to me in the car. I was driving and a commercial for Lipscomb's marriage and family therapy program came up and I was like, huh, interesting. I've never heard of that before. And kind of started thinking about that. Like, what would it be like to be a therapist? And maybe that would be really interesting. And I like movies about therapists. And then found out that play therapy was a thing. And went and met with somebody who I happened to know that did play therapy at the time, and walked away from meeting with her and was like, yep, okay. I think actually that day I told the mom of the family, like, hey, what does this look like for us? Like, here's what I'm thinking. And took my GRE, went into Lipscomb's second.
You had to take the GRE to get into Lipscomb?
Yeah. They weren't taking the MAT at the time.
I was going to say, I did not have to take the GRE to get into Trevecca.
I was not going to be good at either one. And so it was just a matter of
the MAT wasn't bad.
That's what people kept saying. But like the whole analogy
a lot of common sense.
Yeah. I was like, both of these are going to be terrible.
Yeah.
I've never been a strong test taker.
Same.
So I like cried, powered through it, and made it out on the other side.
Yeah, I'm glad that you went to because I was wondering, you said you started those therapy sessions when you were 25. So I was wondering, which I'm assuming meant your undergrad had been over for a while.
Yeah.
So how do you get from just kind of being a client in session and going, wow, that was incredible, to wanting to do it? And it was a radio commercial.
Yeah. Well, and I had always known any job that I had from high school on where I wasn't working with kids, I wasn't happy. And so I always knew that that piece was important.
Okay.
So out of undergrad, I was a family counselor for youth villages, which is just next level hard, like a totally different, complete respect to anybody who does those things. I was 22 at the time, straight out of undergrad, walked into a job where they were like, hey, P.S., you have to redefine what you see as success in this job. And I was like, okay. And it was hard. I mean, it was harder than this work. And I think that this, work that I do now is difficult. And I remember actually the catalyst for change in that was I was in my bathroom, and I had this bright, flowery shower curtain that had all these bright colors on it. And I burst into tears and thought, I'm a happy, flowery person. I can't do this work. It was just too much. And I remember saying it out loud to my mom. And the way that I remember it, whether it's true or not, is that my dad came from the back room of their house and was like, great, let's find you another job. I hate that you do this. Because I was going into the projects again at 22 years old, having no idea, and not that's such great work to do, but I didn't know how to do it, they were like, hey, don't wear heels because you need to be able to run. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And I never did, luckily, but there's always that potential of, which granted that could happen here, I guess, but there was, a lot of fear around the work. And quite frankly, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. So from there, it was just, okay, I got to get out of here. I went and taught for an early intervention school on Vanderbilt's campus, which I had never wanted to teach. But they were 3. It was early intervention, colors, numbers, that kind of thing. And I fell in love with the kids. I fell in love with the kids that had special needs. And so I was more being with them and not really understanding the whole teaching part of it. And then this nannying job fell in my lap because the little boy in the family, who's not a little boy anymore, had Down syndrome. And through connections through that, somebody said, hey, they're looking for full time. And at that point, my class had changed over. I had done a full year. And I was like, I still want to be with those kids. This is really hard. So I was trying to figure out, again, kind of that next step, trying to figure out who I am, which was kind of a theme of the movie. And so I ended up nannying and loving that and was really happy. But it wasn't a forever career by any means.
But you were able to identify, and I think it's so interesting. I mean, the thing that I think I love the most about hearing people's stories is, even when, most of the time, when people feel like, I don't know what's going on, I can't put my finger on anything, there's usually one thread they can pick out or pick out. So it was cool to just hear, you recognized it's got to be with kids, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's got to be with kids. I don't know if I even had that. I think maybe I remember saying to somebody early on, you get the question, so if you just had all of the money and you didn't have to pick a job based on, what would you do? And I remember saying, I think I would just hang out with people.
Yeah.
Not in a way of let's go to the beach, but I would want to sit with people and just talk with them and get to know them.
Yes, and good conversation.
Yeah. So clearly I'm screaming that I'm an introvert.
Same.
But
Not
I remember and that was, I think, before I even jumped into a ministry career, which required me to go way extrovert when I did that.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe I did have that. Because, I think coming full circle to where I'm at now, as a therapist, that it's literally exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
If I had all the money, I don't have to worry about money. I do get to just hang out with people. And, that sounds a little unstructured. But, to be with people.
Yeah.
And to talk with them and have good conversations.
Absolutely.
And help them and...
Yeah. The best conversations that I have are in this room.
Yeah.
And I've had that same thought. Whenever it was 6 months ago when the lottery was so big, because, a couple million, that's chump change. But when it was so big and I thought, if I won, I wouldn't chuck my practice, I wouldn't, I would be seeing maybe 1 or 2, but I couldn't imagine not sitting with people in this capacity.
Oh yeah. I would augment the practice. Like I would buy an office suite and like
Yes.
get, people coming straight out of grad school space and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where it did give you I would get a little more passive income.
Yes.
And then it gave me a little more freedom to where I could do, I don't know, all kinds of other cool stuff to help people.
Yeah. 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 You gotta have that purpose, right? Like you can't just chuck it all out the window.
Yeah.
You gotta have something that gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Oprah said that or something.
Yeah, definitely. Or somebody on The Bachelor.
Or somebody on The Bachelor, because they're very wise.
Either or.
Yes.
So let's talk movies.
Yeah.
What movie did you bring this week?
Yes. So, full circle on my journey, I guess. And then on, saying that I'm really passionate about kids. I do work with kids, but I also work with teen girls and adult women as well. And so we went back and forth kind of on movies, and there just wasn't a movie that stood out to me on the kid part. So I love that. I'm going to set that to the side for a second. And I ended up picking How to Be Single because I feel like that's trickling into my office more and more. And just in general, I think anytime we find ourselves not at the life stage it seems like we should be at, that's really hard.
Yeah.
And I've spent, a good chunk of my life. Oh, P.S. I'm still single. I spent a good chunk of my life figuring out.
OPS?
Yeah. Well, I felt like that was important because I didn't say
What's OPS mean?
Oh, like O ...
Oh,
P.S.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was like a
It actually
TLDR or like IRL or something. I was
Wait,
like,
what's TLDR?
oh, too long didn't read.
Too long didn't read.
Yeah, like if somebody's going to start explaining something at length and you just need give me the TLDR.
I really should know what that means because
Yeah.
that feels really important for me, A, to send to other people, and B, for people to say to me. That's good. TLDR.
Yeah, so I thought you were abbreviating something.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't stand for anything cool other than, what does PS stands for something?
Postscript, I think.
Oh,
OPS.
so PS. Yeah. So still being single and figuring out the last several years what it's like to be single in the South, in the Bible Belt, in my 30s, in a place where that's not super common.
Where are you
it's not
from?
uncommon here, born and raised.
In Nashville?
Mm-hmm. Are you going to be the third person today to call me a unicorn?
No.
No? Okay, cool. You're going to be original. I like it. I was with some people, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're a unicorn. And I was like, yeah, that's a thing that
Did you
people
know that
say
if you look
now.
in the King James Version of the Bible, there are 3 places where unicorns are mentioned? That's a true statement.
Really?
Yeah.
That's exciting. And my
Because of
niece will
that
be really
particular
happy.
translation, that's what they chose to translate that Hebrew word as.
That is
unicorn.
amazing. Unicorn. I mean, they're pretty fantastic. Sparkly, colorful, all those things.
So part of it is trying to figure out how to do all that.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, unicorns? What? Yes. Figuring out how to do all of that. And so when this movie came out, it's funny. I was watching it back the other night and I was like, wow, this is like kind of a bunch of like silly nonsense sandwiched between 2 really profound things, where she kind of opens up with this, like, this is the story about what happens in between relationships, which was immediately, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. Because that's what, we tell stories through relationship. And she wanted to hone in on the in between.
When she did say a line about something about telling stories in the context of relationships. And what struck me about that is that's the whole reason why I went MFT.
Yeah.
Because I remember saying, I think that the overwhelming majority of people that end up in the office on the couch, maybe they're not there because of a relationship, but it might be something that a relationship surfaced.
Yes.
And I think that people exist in the context of relationships. And I don't mean necessarily interpersonal relationships, but maybe intrapersonal, like their relationship with themselves, their relationship with others, their relationship with higher power, divine being, God, the universe, whatever, people want to label it as. But to me, it just was like, oh yeah, relationships. That's how it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I agree. I don't think it's funny. I was, again, reflecting on what all we were going to talk about on my way in. And I knew, kind of that big question of, okay, pick a movie of what makes you want to be in relationship and what makes you not want to be in relationship. And that was the like, okay, yes, I definitely want to do this movie because it does both of those things for me. Like it makes me like, yeah. And I think that that's the key part of being single, male or female, is having that balance of, I want to be okay by myself. And I know that I'm created and drawn and pulled for connection. So how do I hold space for both of those and balance those out? And that's some of the biggest growth that I've made is saying both of these 2 things can exist together.
Yeah, they're both true.
they're both true, and they both need to be true.
Yeah.
And so, yes, to say that it's the story about what happens in between relationship, to me, it was more, this is a story about what happens between intimate relationship. Well, not even intimate relationship, but like seeking marriage relationship. Because yes, what happens in between her relationship with the men is her relationship with the friendships, and her relationship with her sister.
And with herself.
And with herself, yes, which I think ultimately, I think that's one of the notes I made at the end was like, and a lot of what I talk to my clients about and maybe in my own head is that like sometimes at the end of the day, it is all I have is myself. So you better really love yourself, and you really need to learn to connect with that part of yourself. Because even in relationship, sometimes at the end of the day, all you have is you. And again, your spiritual connection, whatever that is, but one's a little easier to grasp onto than the other sometimes.
Yeah, and I think I don't even necessarily think it's so much that I would want to say all you have is you. More so like your relationship with yourself is the foundation that your relationship with others is built upon.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
If you don't have and this is coming from a place of like, I'm 38 now. Leigh-Ann and I got married when I was 35. So like I was 33 and single.
It can happen.
Like, yeah, I mean, and I know that like in moments of unhealth, I went to the self-pity place of, you know, oh, I'm just not built for this, or I'm too messed up, or, you know, there's
I'm not
nobody
worthy.
Yeah, or there's nobody out there that'll match me. And in moments of health, it was, you know, right now I'm focusing on, because I mean, I got into therapy as a client when I was 33. And so at that point in time, I was able to recognize, okay, so I have had several failed relationships. The common denominator amongst all of them was me.
Sure.
So I can't do anything about them.
Yeah.
I can do something about me. So let's take this, when I say moment, I mean, it was over the course of 2.5 years, but like, let's take this time to really figure out what's up with me, like what's going on with me, and what can I do about that?
Yeah.
And you know, I think I said on an episode or two ago, you know, I ended up at the place where I wasn't doing a job that I loved, but I really, really liked myself. And I ended up saying, I'm okay doing this job forever if it means I get to like myself.
Yeah.
And actually at that job, it was at Starbucks. That's where Leigh-Ann and I met. And so I
love that.
had ended up in this place of, I finally like myself.
Yeah.
You know, even though I don't like this job, but because I had done that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was open, you know, and I wasn't looking to say like, hey, person I may meet, let me depend on you. Let me dump all my hang-ups and issues on you.
Yes.
But it was like, all right, my slate's kind of clean right now. Like,
yeah. And I think that's my favorite takeaway from the movie. There's a point where Alice, the main character, says like, that's the magic, when she's talking to Tom, who's the playboy kind of thing. And he's finally like, maybe I have feelings for her. And he says something, it really doesn't feel that relevant to me. Because at the end, when Meg, the sister, has the baby, and Ken, I think is his name, who I love because he was from The Office as well.
Oh yeah, I just wrote down Plop.
Oh,
that's
Plop, yes. Oh my gosh, like every time he walks into something, I'm like, Plop, and I love you. Like, yeah, if he walked in here and was like, hey, let's hang out, I'd be like, that's cool. But yeah, so he comes in and she's holding the baby and she's like, I think I love you too. I mean, I do love you, but like, I don't need you. Like, I mean, it's her avoidant attachment kind of coming out, right? But what I love is that she essentially says, I can do this by myself, but I don't want to. Like, that to me, that's the magic. Like, that's exactly what you're saying, getting to that place of, I like myself and I feel okay, and I want someone to do this with me. I made a joke a long time ago when I started playing with this idea of like, okay, singleness, like what does that look like, and how do you be single, like how do you do that well? And I had a similar thought, and I think I put it out into the universe because I thought it was funny whether other people did or not. And I said, I can kill my own spiders. I don't want to anymore, you know, like I can climb up on the bed and get the shoe and whack it, or get out the vacuum cleaner and whatever. And we talked about the damsel in distress thing, not my thing, but it's also really nice to be able to be like, hey, you're taller than me. Can you reach up and just whack that?
Yeah.
You know, like I can do it on my own, but there are some things that are just better to do with other people.
Yeah. I was talking to a client the other day who I was encouraging that when they feel lonely to reach out to others, because lonely is the message that gets sent from your heart when you need connection, you know?
Yeah.
And they said, so what? Like, every time I feel lonely, I got to call somebody? I was like, no, you don't have to. You get to.
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh, good.
Yeah, it's a really therapist-y kind of way.
Sure, but it's so good, right?
Yeah, I was like, you don't have to. Like, you get to. And you got to understand, like, you've lived your life running away from this kind of thing forever.
Yeah.
The whole reason why you're in the office is because you want to change it.
Yeah.
Change is going to be uncomfortable no matter what the change is.
Yeah,
and so
it's
in
very
this
vulnerable.
case, and the way that I ended up kind of explaining it was, I took a piece of paper and I wrote on the bottom, independent, like you don't need anybody. Then at the top I wrote dependent, like you can't do it without, a certain person. And in the middle I wrote interdependent. And I was like, interdependent is you're okay on your own, but it's so much better.
Yeah.
With other people.
Yeah.
I said, and that's really the sweet spot.
Yes.
Is you've gotten to the place where you're not looking for other people to fill a hole or do, something that you don't want to do on your own. Yeah. But you also recognize it's just better.
Yeah, it's just better. That table, there's 3 tables. Well, 2 tables and a bookshelf in this space. There is a TV stand and a giant glass bookshelf and a couch in my apartment. All of which I built on my own because they were like Wayfair, IKEA, Target things. But I built them all by myself. And I look at them and I'm like, I did that on my own. I'm really proud. Each piece probably took me between 4 and 8 hours to do individually, each one. And I cussed and I yelled and I sweat and I got frustrated and I got mad. So there's this sense of pride of like, look what I did. Like, look what I did on my own. And gosh, it would have been a lot more fun to have somebody else doing that with me. And it probably would have cut the time in half. Because sometimes, quite frankly, it was a number of hands. One of these pieces, somebody here actually did help me with because she said, do you need help for a second? And I was like, oh, I really need to say yes. And so I did. And we got something done a lot faster because I wasn't trying to juggle things, know? So yes, it's that I can do it, but it's way better to do it with somebody else and faster.
That's true.
Yeah.
So what was it? I mean, usually I'll say, what was it about the movie that drew you to it?
Yeah.
Clearly there's like some parallel or theme in it that you feel kind of akin to.
Yeah. I like about this movie that it wasn't predictable. It was in some ways, in fairness, but you were waiting for Tom, the playboy, to either end up with Alice or with Lucy. Or, like that when I was watching it, I was like, oh, I can see how this is going to play out. But it ended with her still being by herself.
That's true.
Yeah. And each character.
Or David. I thought maybe she would end up with David.
Yeah. I have lots of feelings about David. Yeah. He, for such like a brief, screen time or whatever. I love that they brought in that perspective of the single parent being widowed, and oh my gosh, that little girl is just precious. Yeah. But so let's pull in the kid side of me, right? That's like, oh guys, you got to talk to your kids. Like, we think we're protecting them and we're hiding things from them, but for her to be like, hey, and what it says about body memory, again, not to get like too therapist-y, but that she remembered that song, the Eyes of You song is
and
what she called it. And it
seems like he could never figure out what she was talking about, because it's not until the end where he sees something on TV with the song on it, and she says,
he did
"Oh,
know.
That's the
She hadn't put it together. He knew, because that's why he got mad. He heard Alice sing it because she was asking for it. She was craving for that connection and that understanding that she didn't have, because we got to put words to things, especially for kids. That's the whole point of narrative work. But yeah, he walks in, he gets mad because she's singing it. Alice says, you've got to talk to your daughter about these things. And then he pulls out the video and shows it to her of her mom singing to her. And she whispers, and it always brings, I don't think I cried all in this movie except for that part when she says the Eyes of You song, because her body remembered how important that was. And she needed that to be connected and to know that I can talk about that with Dad. And then he sings and she says, now I know why you don't sing. Which is just precious. So yeah, that whole such a small character development, storyline development, but so good.
Yeah, I mean, I joked although it's completely true, that I wrote like a character map of all these characters and relationships in the movie.
Yeah.
Just because I was trying to keep track of who they were and what relationships they had. But you've got pretty much like 4 main women parts. The biggest of which is Alice, who at the beginning of the movie is with Josh.
Yes.
And then they split up.
Because she needs to find herself.
Yeah, which
she needs to do life on her own.
When you told your story at the beginning, I was like, oh, that's kind of where she was at. Where she was like, I don't know. So let's break up so I can figure it out.
Little different. Yeah. I thought that I knew. He did not.
Okay.
And so it became a...
Well, no, I meant like
after
as far as the
was,
catalyst for the story was...
Yes.
I've got an idea or I don't.
Yeah.
And so what launches is in pursuit of confirmation of...
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and she keeps saying, who am I? I have to figure out who I am, which is like, good luck. We spend our whole lives trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
That's
the difference between Freud and Erikson. Freud said you're already fully formed by the time you're 5. And Erikson was like, nah, it's the whole time.
Ever changing. Yeah. Ever changing.
Which I'll say this, like her relationship with Josh, at the beginning of the movie, I was with her. And then...
What do you mean with her?
With her in the sense of she was saying... No, I'm sorry. At the beginning of the movie, I was with him.
Okay. I was like, oh, we're not going to be on the same page with it.
Yeah. Because she was saying like, oh, we should break up and take a break.
Season 3 Ross.
Yeah.
Best line.
Yeah. So that we can figure this out. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Like, and I'm like, yeah, that is insane.
Yeah.
And then she ends up coming back saying like, okay, I'm done. And he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And he's like, and I'm with somebody. And I was like,
yes. Yeah.
Because what she did was terrible.
Yes.
And then he comes back and does a terrible thing later.
That whole thing is so, again, talk about toxic relationships. But it was kind of the millennial thing, right? Of like, I have to go and I have to figure out myself. Like I went from my parents' house to the dorm to you, which is true. Like I listened to that and I'm like, yeah, like I think that time of figuring out not who you are, because it's an ever changing question, but that time of figuring out like, who am I by myself, at least to some extent, I do think that is important. I don't, speak down to or judge anybody who did marry their person right out of college. I think that's great. And I know lots of stories like that are beautiful. Mine was different. If I would be a completely different person if I had ended up marrying that guy and staying with him, and I would be, continuously fabulous as well. But there was so much of figuring things out that I still had left to do that would not have happened. Yeah. I don't think. Obviously you can't speak in absolutes.
Well, I mean, I've always said that if I'd have met Leigh-Ann a day before I met her, it wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah.
Like, I had just not done enough of my work to even know how to know what love is, how to love another person, how to love myself.
Yeah.
Like any of those things.
Yeah. And I think that's what Alice was saying. So I'm glad that you said that, because I was like, oh, that may not go over well, because it isn't so much about the timing of college versus in your 30s as much as it's where are you at and do you feel like you've done your work. And I felt like that's what she was saying. She wasn't, because she's not a therapist and normal people don't always talk like that. But she was saying, I haven't done my work. She says later in the movie, I have all of these things that I say that I'll do and I never do, or these things that I want to do. I want to go hike the Grand Canyon on New Year's Eve and watch the sunrise, and I'll never do it. And even in that, when she met David, she was like, I'm going to see the Rockefeller like by herself, which is that like, I'm going into a crowded place by myself. But those are the kind of those power moments for people who are single of like, I did that cool thing by myself. And he comes in and he's like, let me show you. And he takes her and shows her in a different way, and so and then she talks about hiking the Grand Canyon at New Year's, and he's like, okay, but why don't we do something together?
Oh, there's all these interesting changes. I didn't think about it in the way that you just said it. Like, she was saying, I'm going to go see the Rockefeller Christmas tree. And then he said, and he showed it to her in a different way. It was almost like she had this narrative, this way that she wanted to do something. And then for a brief period of time, which, I mean, she does this, I think, with 3 different guys in the movie. She attached herself or allowed herself to become attached to another person. And then that person dictated how the experience went.
Yeah. Can we talk about what Robin called that? I don't know how censored this podcast is.
It's not.
She calls it the dick sand.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. But that's like, she's like, you fall into their dick sand.
Yeah.
Because honestly, even when she went with David, she didn't know he was taking her to see the tree.
Oh,
he
yeah.
said, come with me. And she's like, okay.
And then they went into an abandoned building, and she's like, is this...
You're going to Dexter me. Yeah. Yeah, bye. Which
is funny. I've never seen Dexter. I was thinking American Psycho when Christian Bale literally brings a guy back to his place and the guy is sitting in a chair. He begins to lay out plastic tarps in the living room while the guy is just sitting there. He's not tied up, anything.
No, you leave, dude.
And then he walked behind him and pulls out an axe and...
Of course he did.
Yeah.
My mom and I have this ongoing joke. We love horror movies, and we're always like, we might be a little dead inside that we like love these so much. But we're like, we would survive. Like, why are these people so stupid? Like, we would survive the horror movie. That was the whole
premise of Scream.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody pulls out plastic, you get out. You know, you can finish that conversation outside or at the police station.
Yeah, but she was like, have you seen Cabin in the Woods?
Oh, maybe. I can't remember.
It's Drew Goddard directed it. Chris Hemsworth is in it.
Oh, no. I would remember that.
Yeah, it might be on Netflix, but it's basically another Scream type with tropes. So like a group of, 5 or 6 teens goes to a cabin in the woods, and then it kind of lays out all of the tropes and says there's an athlete, there's a promiscuous girl,
there always is.
Yeah, there's a smart one, there's a virgin, and then it starts turning everything on its... Bradley Whitford's in it. It's good. It doesn't go where you think it's going to go.
Sure.
I don't want to say anymore because I'll spoil it.
Yeah, no, I'll watch it. If it's good, I'll watch it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, the dick sand, she fell into that.
Yeah, time and time again.
So she took this, what she thought was going to be a break with her original boyfriend, and
meets Tom and says, I don't want to do this. Because Tom says, this is men. This is what men are, which I think is a very unfair generalization.
But she met him through Robin? Did she know Robin?
No, they worked together.
Okay.
So she started at the paralegal firm or whatever it was. Robin takes her out that night on her rum springer, which I'm like, I should look that up. I don't know that I know what that means. But essentially, let's get drunk and sleep with guys. A what show?
A reality show about, it's an Amish thing. So in the Amish community, once a kid reaches a certain age, they're able to go out into the world. I think it's for a year.
I don't think I knew that's what it was called.
Yeah, I think it's for a year. And then at the end of that year, they can decide, do they want to come back and be a part of the Amish community, or do they want to stay out?
Maybe I did know that's what it was called, but I forgot.
She said it was like a sexual rum springer.
A sexual rum springer, yeah. And Tom is the palate cleanser. Like, that's
She said he's a sexual sorbet.
Yes. Well, and on top of that, yes, the sexual sorbet. So she has to she says, go get drinks from those guys. And so she's already thrust into single life, right? And that like awkward, like, hey y'all, and she's super weird and like it's painful to watch and really uncomfortable. So she goes through this process of like, oh, this sucks to be out there again, because let's face it, it is. Dating is hard. It's not super fun, especially the way that it's done now. And so so she kind of has that slap in the face, and then hooks up with Tom, who the next morning doesn't even have water connected to his faucet because he wants girls up and out as quick as they can. And so she leaves all of that, and she's like, okay, like that's what's out there. I don't want to do that. You think so?
Yes. Look how much he controlled his environment.
Oh, that's true. And what worst case scenario was falling in love?
Well, so the basic need of a 6, or the basic fear, is fear of the loss of safety and security. If he had avoidant attachment and he thought that being in a relationship was danger because he'd get hurt.
Yeah.
Then
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Because even at the point that he decides, I have feelings for Lucy, he tells her, she's like, great, let's get married. And he's like, never mind. Yep. Like, yeah, no, for sure. Avoidant. And I can totally see that.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's
Got
6.
one. Yeah. Can we talk about briefly, just again, as being a single person that has to be in the world dating, the scene, the rum and coke scene, when she comes with the date and he's like using all of these phrases for uncomfortable sexual positions, and he's like, say rum and coke if you want me to bail you out. And she's like, rum and coke, and she runs off. Oh, it's my nightmare.
Yeah, there's a lot of code.
Yeah.
Like out in the world.
Yeah.
Right now, there's an infinite amount of reasons why I'm glad that Leigh-Ann and I are married.
Yeah.
But I remember once we got serious, like before we got engaged, I was like, oh, thank God I've never got a date again.
Yes. Oh, I
It's
tell
the
my friends,
worst.
I tell my friends my stories so to remind them to be grateful that they don't have to do it. And quite frankly, I don't really do it. I kind of try to avoid it. Well, I don't try to avoid it, but I'm just very careful. I went on a date with a guy who got mad at me because he had this idea of a website called Babies in Dangerous Places, which would be pictures of babies photoshopped into like various.
So we're not putting the babies in these
No,
places.
no,
We're just photoshopping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Flash forward, I stormed out. Should they have been actual pictures, I would have stormed out sooner and called the police. But it was just Photoshop, and I was like, I don't think that's funny. And he like got mad at me for not thinking that it was funny. And I was like, I just, I work with, I don't get it. And he told me, I'll never forget this. It was so funny. He said, "You must not be a very good therapist because you're not very empathetic." And I was like, A, that's not okay for you to say. And B, how do those things even go together? Like, I'm not being empathetic by thinking that these pictures of babies are a bad idea. And so I was like, you know what? I don't think we like kind of got into it. And I was like, I gotta go. And he was like, fine. And I went out and he actually jumped the fence to get off the patio because I had to walk back past the patio. I have men jumping fences for me, but in totally different ways. Mine jumped to leave, not to stay.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, well, and what's really funny, you'll actually appreciate this, is he, I don't know how interesting this actually is, but he had asked me when I got there and I told him I was a therapist, he said, "What's your sign?" Which, how would you answer that question if somebody said, "What's your sign?"
Did it come right after the therapist talk?
No. Like, I think I had said, "I'm a therapist."
Okay.
Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, what's your sign?" Just like go to
Scorpio.
Right. Same. I was like, "Pisces?" And he was like, "No, like you're 4 letters. Like whatever he was." And I was like, Myers-Briggs. Oh, okay. And I was like, "I'm an ESFJ."
Oh my gosh. You said 4 letters and the first thing I thought was LMFT.
Oh, no. That too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he was talking about Myers-Briggs. He was trying to like make a connection, which great, good for, like, I was glad. And so I was like, okay, cool. So we leave, I storm out on this date. He hops the fence. We go our separate ways and I'm just fuming. And this is going to be another 6 months of me even not considering going on a date probably. And I get a text and I was like, no way is this guy going to text me now? Like, it's late. There's nobody else that could be texting me. I look up, sure enough, it's him. I click on it and he sent me a link of an article of why our Myers-Briggs letters don't go together. And he was like, clearly I should have read this first. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, like,
but you didn't know what my Myers-Briggs was.
Yeah,
so how would
you wouldn't have gone. Yeah, and again, not the problem. Like, different senses of humors, whatever. But like, it's stories like that I'm just like, oh my God. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy, but that was not a good connection.
Clearly he had an inability to be flexible and empathize himself. Because like, if I would have come up with an idea for Babies in Dangerous Places, and you would have said, well, that's not that funny, I would have tried to make a joke then about like, okay, cool. So what if it was condiments in dangerous places? What if it was shoes in dangerous places?
Yeah.
Like, let's workshop this together and make this.
Well, and here's the thing. I have a sense of humor. Like, and typically I'm almost too far the other way of like, ha 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 ha, to things that I don't really think is funny. Because he did say, he was like, well, do you play Cards Against Humanity? And I was like, that's a fair point. I was like, there are some cards in there that I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm laughing at this. And so I wasn't like, that's not funny, or you shouldn't do that. Like, I just was like, I don't get it. And like, I don't know how I feel about that, like being put out in the world. Well, and when I said to him, well, I don't know that I said this to him, but my thought was like, great, go and do that. I'm just suddenly aware that I don't want to date somebody that's their life goal is to create this.
But then he doubled down and made something personal. Like, you must not be a good therapist.
Oh,
at that
like,
point, especially if it's a first date, it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah, talk about EFT, like shooting the bullet. Like, he just found a bullet and shot it. That wasn't even relevant to what was going on. So anyway, so those are the dating horror stories that that I'm like, hey, go home and give your wife a kiss. Tell her. I
had a date begin choking one time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had gotten set up, and we were at Outback. And I think it was on
a Bloomin' Onion?
I think it was on green beans or something like that.
Oh gosh.
But like, she was in the middle of saying something and was like eating while she was talking, and all of a sudden she just kind of started like the light cough or whatever.
Which is
and
so
then it got bigger and
embarrassing.
bigger, and then she just ran off
She
away from the
probably
table.
panicked, yeah.
And I was left standing there, and I knew she went to the bathroom.
Right.
But I also knew, like, this is the first time I've hung out with this person.
Oh my gosh.
And I can't go into the women's bathroom.
Right.
And so I sat there thinking, well, maybe she went to get a drink of water and she'll be back any second. But it became an uncomfortable amount of time that she was gone.
She could be passed out, and I'm sitting here at the table eating my cheese fries.
Or I actually thought maybe she just left.
Oh.
And so I actually thought, I wonder how long would be an appropriate amount of time before I start eating. Is actually what I thought. Because I was like, this is a really good, this is a good meal. I want to say. So when she came back, the whole front of her shirt was wet.
Oh, bless her heart.
And I was like, what happened? And so she had gone to the restroom because she was choking.
Oh, gosh.
And then on her way out, she was coming out the door, and it was a setup where the restrooms were like in the hallway that's on the way to the kitchen.
Sure. Oh.
So a waiter was rounding the corner with a pitcher of water, and she bumped into him, and it spilled all down her front. And and I was like, oh my gosh,
I think this date is over.
This is traumatic. I am so sorry. Like, and then like we chatted about it or something, and I said, I didn't laugh at any point when she came back, but I did say a few minutes later, at what point do you think we'll be able to laugh about this?
Yeah. How'd she respond to that?
She was like, I don't know, in a while. I said, when do you think you'll tell your roommates about it? And she's like, as soon as I get in the door.
Absolutely.
I was like, yeah, that's probably right.
Oh my gosh. So separate incidents. She choked, went into the bathroom, came out, got water, spilled all over her, had to go back in and try to dry herself off.
Which I can't even begin to imagine how embarrassing those things would be on separate dates.
Yes.
Much less within the same 10 minutes.
But see that, like, I actually would laugh at that pretty quickly, because I would, depending on how scary the choking incident was, like, that is dramatic. But, like, I think I would be able to laugh at that.
I feel like if the
quickly.
person, when you sit back down, isn't trying to pretend like nothing happened or isn't, you know what I mean? I was like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, also, this is pretty funny. Yeah. Like, when do you know?
So let's take it back to The Bachelorette again, because we have this underlying theme. When Jed, our Nashville boy, walks up and Luke,
like episode 1 and
sees Luke and Hannah being quite intimate. And I was like, there's no, like, dang it, because we've never had a good, like, there's been good Nashville people. We've never had a Nashville hometown. Like, I'm really cheering for Jed to, like, make us look good and bring a hometown here so we can see, like, how they portray Nashville. I sound far too obsessed. Anyways. So I was like, oh, this is where he's going to, like, go off the rails. And the way he handled that was so perfectly. Like, she sits down and he was like, don't be embarrassed. Did you know you're dating, like, 28 other guys here? And, like, laughs it off and, like, plays it out. And she's like, oh, my gosh, thank you for making a joke. And
I wondered how sincere that was, because I don't.
It felt sincere.
I don't think I would have taken that personally, because obviously it's The Bachelor.
That's what you signed up for.
But I don't know if I would have been like, here are all these other guys. I think I would have just been like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe like a do not disturb thing on the door handle or something. That would have let me. That would have let me know. But,
but I think it was, again, going back to, like, that underlying emotion was probably like, oh my gosh, I just saw you, like, making out with somebody else, and, like, I don't know that I want you to kiss me now or whatever. But, like, that's what this show is, and so I've got a choice here.
He at least recognized, which I think the person she got caught, massaging or whatever, Luke P, hasn't done this. Jed at least recognized, we just met.
Right.
So, like, I don't have this giant attachment to you yet. Correct. I'd like to have it. Yeah. But we don't have it yet.
Which in and of itself says, I am securely attached.
Yeah. Which, as Luke P on, like, episode 2 or whatever, said he loved her when they did the Mr. Right pageant.
This was my favorite, because here's the other thing. As a new bachelorette person, you don't know that there are these phases, and it's become this joke. So there's the working backwards. There's the I'm in love with you. I'm falling in love with you.
No, I've seen that. I caught it in Colton's season.
I think I could fall in love with you. So there's these, like, 3. So Lukey P just added in, like, another initial. I think that I could maybe start possibly falling in love with you. Like,
that's a lot of layers removed.
A lot of layers removed.
Yeah.
Anxious attachment.
Well, no, because I've been watching the Bachelor Fantag YouTube channel. So he's outlining all of that. He's even gone as far as, he's got a couple of videos on, here's how you pick the winner in episode 1.
Yeah.
Because he talks about the different types of girls or guys on the show.
Yeah.
Like, there's a white knight, there's a villain, there's, whatever. And he talks about how by watching the preview, of the whole season, which usually comes at the end of the first episode and the first episode,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of at least get down to a top 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just based on that.
Yeah. If you really pay attention. Like I don't like knowing, so I kind of like don't try to focus in. But you absolutely can like focus in and be like, okay, that's so and so's hair, or like you said at the beginning, we were talking before, Tayshia's nail color. Yeah, you can definitely kind of, and it's out there. I mean, Reality Steve.
Yeah.
You know, like it's all out there.
Yeah,
so.
you can get spoilers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to talk about The Bachelor because
Okay, yeah,
we
sorry.
might end up doing a whole episode on that. So
We are. Yes, I'm loving this plan.
So back to How to Be Single.
Yeah.
I want to bring in some other characters. So
Yeah.
we've got Alice is kind of the hub that this wheel rotates on.
Yeah.
But we
who
also
am I and how am I figuring that out?
but we also I think this happens before we meet Robin. We also get introduced to Lucy.
Yeah.
Like Alice in the context of this relationship's breaking up, Lucy, which as a recent departure of being an employee of a place that does this kind of thing, when she is holding her laptop computer in her apartment trying to get Wi-Fi and then holds it outside the window and drops it onto the ground, I was like, you
Come on.
dumb dummy.
Yes.
What in the world?
Yeah.
But
That one was predictable.
we like meet her in the context of, I think she's trying to get onto a dating website and she says that she's come up with these algorithms.
Yes, the
to, like,
algorithms.
which I did appreciate. There was a lot of times during this movie where they had graphics on the screen that I was like, oh, that makes this really easy to understand. So her example of, I think there were peanuts or something at the bar.
She's
and
looking
just
for
saying
a
there's
peanut.
this many people in New York.
Half are women.
Yeah. Half are women, so take half the peanuts away. X amount are guys that are married. X
Some
amount
are gay.
Yeah, gay.
And then she goes to her list because we all, whether we want to admit it or not, have that list, right? I want someone who wants kids. I want
Not
someone
taller
who has
than
a
me.
job.
Or no,
yeah.
not shorter than me.
Not
That was
shorter
the-
than me.
yeah.
Yeah. Like the list starts going
And
through.
then she gets down to one peanut, and then Tom's like, "Oh yeah, cool, that's it." And then she smashes that
Crushes it.
peanut, takes these pieces away, those pieces away, and so you kind of have almost parallel storylines of Alice and Lucy, whereas Alice is really on a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
I think at the best points of her story.
Yeah. That's what she's wanting
Yeah,
to do.
Lucy, on the other hand, is almost diving deeper into
Yeah.
her anxiety and
Yeah.
her, because she then tries to.
That's
she
her
tries
goal.
so hard to get a guy attached to her.
And to fit him into that tiny little peanut crumb.
Yeah, that was pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
I think watching that, because there's so many things that she did that I could see that I did in the same way.
Really?
When I was there. Yeah, I mean, I did have a list and I did have an idea. And I think I even at one point got to a place where I recognized, well, a list is not helpful. It's like
Yeah.
walking into McKay's with an idea of a book you want to get. Like,
Yeah.
you can't walk into McKay's. McKay's is this place in Nashville that I don't know if it is anywhere else. It's like this
I think so.
giant used books and movies and records
Yeah.
and
Buy, sell, trade
toys
kind of
and
thing.
yeah, so you can walk in. If you walk in with nothing on your mind, you'll probably find something. If you walk in going, I got to get this book,
Yeah.
you'll never find it
Yeah.
in a million years.
Yeah. Well, the other piece that we're missing that we talked about with Alice is it was like, okay, I need to go do my own work. Like I have my own work to do to figure out how to be in a relationship. We don't know with Lucy. So that's kind of where I'm at with her is, do I necessarily disagree with what she's doing? I'm annoyed by it. If she's ready and she's done her work and she's in a space of, like you said, where if you had met Leigh-Ann a day sooner, you wouldn't have been ready. It's still a lot, but it's that like, okay, I'm ready. And so I know what I want and I'm seeking for that thing and, waiting to see when that shows up. But we don't get her backstory. Like, is it an anxious,
Yeah.
I need a man kind of thing? Or is it like, I'm feeling great and I'm happy with my life and I'm ready to add this
Well,
thing
she
in?
did say there was one line at the beginning where like 3 girls see her at the bar.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Where they say something like, "Are you getting married?" And she said something like, "Yes, but I've been getting ready to get married for 18." So
Yeah.
it alludes to this, like,
Yeah.
for 18 years prior, she's been planning her wedding and
Yeah.
all of this stuff.
I read to the kids I don't have
without
yet.
the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. So which makes me kind of go, oh, this is more about a relationship.
Yeah.
Or any relationship,
Yeah.
or about the little M marriage than
Yeah.
it is about you know, a specific.
But what I love about that is it speaks to the part that I feel like needs to be addressed of that piece of, I feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be for my life stage. You know, for these women to come in and be like, you're married, right? And the like confusion and then understanding that happens when Tom walks up and pretends to be her boyfriend. And they're like, oh, okay, there's a whole Sex in the City.
Fit our template.
Exactly.
Now.
There's a whole Sex in the City episode about that of like, oh, we don't understand you if you're single, but oh, you fit into this category. Like it makes sense.
Which they pull in the movie.
Yes.
Somebody calls out like, you know, those women were just looking for boyfriends the entire series.
Yeah. Stop watching Bridget Jones and Sex in the City. Yeah. All they ever did was look for. But it is. And it's that the reality is like, I've been there. It's that trigger that happens when somebody says, oh, you're not, or why are you single, or whatever it is. All of these, you know, the shame starts spiraling in you of like, why there's something wrong with me. Like the message that I'm getting here is that there's something wrong with me. And if you're not grounded, if you're not secure, if you're not connected to that part of you, then you do spiral out of control.
Yeah.
Oh, I read to my kids that I don't have yet, and oh, it's fine, huh? I can't even remember what else she says, but I mean, she literally talks like that in this very heady space of how do I get out of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the life stages thing is an interesting concept because I mean that's where I was, like when I was in my early 30s and I was still single. I remember, you know, I would get upset when my mom would say something like, oh, well, when you have a kid or something, because I thought, oh, you're jumping ahead. Like there's things that have to happen in order for that to happen that I'm nowhere near making happen.
Yeah.
But even like if you want to talk about, you know, Lucy's list and the things that she wanted a guy to fit into, there is an age difference between Leigh-Ann and I, but when we got together, we were both starting grad school. And so we were in the same life stage. Yeah,
similar life stage for
even
sure.
Even though I was, you know, a couple years ahead of her in age,
yeah,
we were still literally going off to do the same thing. And so it just, everything worked out because at that point in time, everything in our lives matched up.
Yeah.
Like we were starting classes and we were moving to a new place.
Yeah. You were still that young adult couple. Yeah, for sure. And I think that expands to anything. I mean, you talk about women either A, who don't want to have kids, or B, deal with infertility. It's that same thing of, you know, oh, I'm at the life stage where I'm supposed to be a young married couple with kids and I'm not. You know, anytime you feel like you're not doing what you're supposed to do. I hate cookie cutters for that reason. It does. Like, I mean, it's why shame is a thing. Like, it's why you and I have a job, is that space where we feel like we don't belong or we're doing something wrong or there's something wrong with us.
Yeah, and I think what ended up being really helpful for me was I thought that life stages still had something to do with age. So when I looked around and saw the people my same age married with, and I don't know why this is a thing, but a lot of the guys in my hometown, the fad became 4 kids.
Oh,
like
that's a lot.
A lot of them had 4 kids.
That's a lot.
And so I look around, I see these guys that are my age. They had careers, they had wives, they had 4 kids.
A kid per hand.
And I was like in this place where I was like, do I want to go to grad school? Do I want to stay here for blah, 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 and was single and all this kind of stuff. And to me at that time, life stage was still attached to a certain year.
Yeah.
But really, I think what helped me the most was realizing life stage doesn't have anything to do with age.
Yeah.
Or if it does, it's so loosely tied, you know. And while one person, I had 2 friends that I knew in Southern California, they got married when they were 19. They were like freshmen or sophomores in college. Still married to this day, which I think means they've been married for 20-something years.
Golly.
You know, they're incredible. They're great. They got 2 daughters. They are the most well-adjusted people I've ever met in my life. Yeah. But I look at it and I'm like, if I'd have gotten married at 19, oh my gosh, that poor woman that would have married, like, holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
And so for me, it's more like, you know, it's more like which I mentioned before, the Erickson thing, where you've got these ways that you're developing for your entire life. And in the same way that when you're in middle school, people's heights take off at different times.
Yeah.
Your life stage may start or happen at a different time than everybody else.
I think that's the important, like, that's why that connection to self is so important, and that like grounding and security and all of those things. Because I'm secure enough to say, I can go hang out with my group of my girlfriends, most of whom are married and are either have kids or are starting to have kids. And I've noticed that I was starting to sit with them and occasionally would be like, oh, like I like feel like I'm getting uglier. And it's that shame like creeping up of like, wait, you're talking about your husband and you're talking about your kid. And I'm really like, you're actually younger than me. And, and so I can get in that headspace. And that's normal. Like, I feel like that's an important part of, it started happening and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. And then I had to shift into this, like, yeah, but it's just what's happening. Like, that insecurity is getting triggered in that moment. And I can make a choice to be like, oh my God, get over that. That's so stupid, or wallow in it or whatever. Or I can sit with it and say, gosh, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard knowing we had a great night and we all went our separate ways, and you guys went home to somebody and I went home to my cat, who's fantastic, but it's different. There's a sense of loneliness there. And that can be okay. I can connect to that part of self and that security that can look back on the story that I told at the beginning of this and say, holy crap, that all played out exactly the way that it was supposed to. And so why would I think anything different for what's laying ahead of me? Or I can sit back and be proud of what I've built around me.
Hey, everybody. This is Josh, and I'm interrupting the episode to ask for your help in getting more people into the theater. I'd love to see Therapist Theater make a dent on the iTunes podcast lists. And the best way to do that is by giving it a 5-star rating and a 5-star review. You can do that now by visiting the show's page in the podcast app. Thanks so much for listening and interacting. Back to the show. And I think, at least this is what's true for me. I don't think things played out the way they were supposed to, because I don't think there's a way that things are supposed to play out.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, it's more along the lines of getting to a place of acceptance of the way that things turned out.
Sure.
Which may be semantics. But, like, as I look back, I realize, there's so many choices that I made in my life that led to other things, and those choices continued.
Yeah.
And I made those choices consciously, unconsciously, intentionally, unintentionally, but I made them.
Yeah.
And because of those choices, X, Y, and Z happened. And that is my story.
That's my story.
It's not a perfect one. It's not even necessarily at times a good one.
Yeah.
But it's mine.
And it's what got you here.
Yeah. And what's interesting is through the lens of, I don't think there's a way things are supposed to play out. But if I look back, I can see that, like, if I wouldn't have gotten fired from my church in San Diego, I wouldn't have gone back to South Carolina.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have started working at my home church. I wouldn't have gotten laid off from my home church, which caused me to get a job at Starbucks because of the health care, because I wanted to continue therapy, which means I wouldn't have met Leigh-Ann, which means because of therapy and Starbucks, I wouldn't have got married to her. So, like, if that little tiny butterfly way back there wouldn't have flapped its wings, none of this stuff today would even be possible or be happening. And I don't think that was a destiny thing. I don't think that was a supposed to thing. I think it was just, I got to the place where I recognized, if I can be in the present moment, really, really in the present moment and connected with myself, then I can make a decision and I can be okay living with those consequences of that decision.
Yeah. I can get on board with that. I like that. Maybe it's not so much the way that it was supposed to play out as much as being able to look back and say, it did play out. It did play out, and here I am. Because we do play that out. People say, like, do you have regrets? And I think back and I don't have any regrets on, that catalyst moment that sent me in this direction. I feel like I can somewhat play out, here's what I think would have happened if we would have ended up staying together and getting married, and that would have been okay. But I know that I wouldn't have become this version of myself. And so it did play out, and I like this version of myself. And this is how my story was supposed to go. I think I do believe that, like, this was how my story was supposed to go. And again, I agree, not necessarily a predestined thing, as much as I can look back and be like, okay, like, each of those things happened that got me here. And so why am I going to throw my hands up now and assume that the rest of my life won't in some way play out the way that feels good to you? And I think the biggest thing is, if
you like yourself today, that's what counts.
Yeah.
And I would say to the listener who's maybe thinking, but I don't like myself today, as a person who was there, that doesn't have to be the end of the story.
Yeah.
That can change. You
Yeah.
can like yourself. It just takes therapeutic work.
Yeah. Yeah. And a willingness to lean into that. I say that to clients and they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know. But that, like, to be able to say, oh, like, I don't feel like I like myself right now. And again, that piece of like, you can either beat yourself up for it or be like, okay, something feels off. And I want to believe that I can care about myself enough that I want to choose to do something different. And I want to take this in a different direction. Yeah, I agree. It's not a, oh, you don't like yourself, everything's done for you. It's figuring out how to get to that place that feels better. And that may be done in connection and relationship or as those just as supporting players in that.
Wow. So we've got some other people that are in the movie. And I'm sure that like maybe Alice got something from each of these things. The main three guys in her life, well, not in her life, but in the story.
Yeah.
Josh, Tom, and David.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. We touched on Tom. We touched on David. We kind of touched on Josh.
Yeah.
I don't know if we got to the gross thing that ended up happening kind of towards the end.
Yeah.
They broke up at the beginning, and she was saying,
I gotta find me.
I need to go away to see if I want to be with you. And he's like, yeah, but I'm sure. And then when she comes back and says, I'm done, he's like, listen, I'm already with somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, you know, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
So then she bumps into him getting pancakes.
Oh, that scene hurts my heart.
Yeah, especially because to-go pancakes, those are going to be soggy by the time you get them back to the house.
Full transparency, at Uber Eats some pancakes Sunday morning. They were not good.
Yeah.
Like, it was real sad because I was
fresh.
really craving them.
Pancakes have the shortest shelf life of any breakfast food.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially once the syrup hits them.
Yeah.
You got to get those things scarfed down real quick.
Yeah, I kept putting
it's a spongy, gross.
Yeah, I kept putting more syrup on, thinking that would help. It didn't. It just So don't.
So
do
she
that.
bumps into him, and he's with his parents.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they're celebrating that he just got into business school.
Yes.
I'm not real sure.
Yeah, which she didn't even know was a goal for him. Yeah, and mom says, "You're so much better than her."
Yes.
Oh.
Like,
what do you do with that?
A few minutes later, I was thinking back on that part because I couldn't remember because my brain is that of a goldfish. I couldn't remember if he was in earshot of that. And I thought if he heard his mom say that, that would be like devastating.
Right. Which doesn't appear to be, because he does. So they don't address whether he heard that, but he sends the picture because they take a selfie of the four of them, and he sends it and says, like, they miss you or whatever.
Oh, no, I think he just said miss you.
Oh, did he?
Which I think is even worse.
Yeah.
Like, because he's with somebody.
Oh, that whole, yeah.
Yeah, which is weird because it seemed like after the breakup that he kind of went the more stable route. Seems. Yeah. And then you get into that situation and you're like, oh no, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like, do you not like the girl that you're with?
Yeah.
Like, do you just, I don't know.
Well, he said I needed closure. I'm making out with you right now because I need, maybe gonna do more, have the intention of doing more because I need closure.
He said to Alice?
Yeah, because that's when she pulled back. Well, he was like, I'm engaged. And she was like, wait, what? And he kind of fumbling through his own words. Yeah, because I don't think I had pinpointed that before. But watching it back the other night, he said, and she says, that's what this is to you? Like,
is this when they were going to have sex?
That last time. Yeah, he actually says to her.
So, in essence, he felt hurt from what she did. So he's trying to basically like get back because he wasn't going to tell her that he was engaged. He may have done that after they slept together.
So here's a question that I have though. Is it that, or so they split and they went two different routes. She was single for a while, and he pretty quickly got into a relationship with somebody else. So she's saying, I'm going to do this work, whether she does it or not, however long it takes her to do it. Did he do his work and then get in a relationship, or did he just jump into a relationship that then kind of came to a head when it was time to make that commitment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I took it more as him, which this is what I'm saying is I was with him at the beginning and then at the end I wasn't.
Yeah, because it wasn't cool that she was like, I'm done, I'm ready for you now. Yeah, and he's like, whoa. Like, good for him for moving on.
I thought more like he was kind of stable and secure at the beginning, and really it wasn't like he needs to do work.
Yeah.
So much as it was like she's kind of going flippantly, we're gonna be on a break.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I was like, oh, no, he's got all kinds. I mean, if he's coming back to try to sleep with her to get closure, only then to probably say I'm engaged and all that is just the worst kind of.
Yeah. Well, and what did he think of her that he even told her in the heat of the moment and expected her to continue moving in that direction
Yeah, that's
with
a
him?
head scratcher.
Yeah. Like, she's like, wait, what? Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing? And what did all of this even mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. Maybe at the beginning it was that he was ready in relationship where she wasn't. And so that's why, he meets somebody else and goes down that route. But yeah, that need, I felt we didn't get, which makes sense because we had so many characters. Like the boys just didn't get developed, the men, excuse me, didn't get developed as well. And so we don't get enough of the story behind, like.
With the exception of David, for the little bit
We
of
do get
screen time that
David.
David had,
Yeah, he has
I
the most
thought
story.
it was like a complete story. She meets him, you're thinking, okay, cool, young, successful, eligible guy. He does the sweet / kind of murdery thing where he shows her the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And then, takes her home, meets his daughter. He has the freak out with the song. And then at the end, when he brings out the video and you just see him, which at that point he's not a part of Alice's story. Like this is just his story.
Well, and he comes back. This was something else that stood out to me that I didn't really pay attention to before. He comes back to the party. She thinks he's going to try to get back together with her, but he really just wants to tell her, which I think is a very grounded moment. He just wants to tell her, you were right and thank you. Like, and that she says, you talked to your daughter, and he's like, yes, I did. Yeah, like he even wanted to come back to her and say, like, you were right and thank you, and here's what I've shifted in with her,
which I think speaks to something bigger in the sense of we have people that come in and out of our lives for brief moments. I was talking with a client the other day who is looking at the potential end of a relationship. And he said something along the lines of, well, this has been a waste of X amount of years.
Oh, that's a hard space to be in.
Yeah, and I was like, has it though?
Yeah.
Because, like, I get that right now it hurts, and I get that it's sad, and I get that there's some anger, but this relationship was the catalyst to get you in the door here, to get you to start therapy. So, like, at the end of it, if the only thing that's different is you, then that's not a waste.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I mentioned that earlier. The question of regrets is always such a weird question to me. And I think I have a couple of games in here that I use with the kids of, icebreaker, get to know you games. And it never fails. They always end up asking me that question, like pulling that card. And I just don't know that I think you can be like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. But like regret is such a big word. And I think for that very reason, like, yeah, I could look back and wish that I had made different choices or decided things sooner or whatever. But ultimately, yes, like it is the butterfly, the moth, whatever it is that, says this thing, then kicked off these other things that happened. And it's just, there's tons of movies and shows about that of, going back and this didn't happen. So here's what life looked like without you kind of thing. Like you can't just throw all that away.
Well, I think a lot of it, if you do the work to process your story, reconcile with it, make peace with it, and accept it. I think it's, to have regrets before you do all that, yes. Afterwards, my phrase is always, were there things that I did that I would maybe choose something different now? Yeah.
Yeah.
But because I'm at a place of acceptance, I like where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I can't regret and change any of that stuff. And we're not talking about regret in the sense of, you hurt somebody and you don't feel sorry for it.
Yeah.
But it's more like,
totally different.
Regretting that you went to Clemson instead of Carolina.
Yeah.
Regretting that, whatever.
Yeah.
But, when you get to that place where you've processed it and you've reconciled and made peace, then you just integrate it and it just becomes a part of you. And I'm saying this right now and it's coming off, I'm recognizing as something that's like, that's so easy. Like, no. This is a years long process.
Yeah. Let's bring Brene into it because I don't think I can do anything that she's not involved in some way, but that's one of my favorite quotes from her. Owning our story is the bravest thing that we ever do. Like saying, this is my story and I've accepted it, like you said. I've grieved parts of it and I understand it. And I'm continually moving forward and gonna do that process over and over and over again.
And that's a good point too, is it's progressive. It doesn't stop. We don't arrive.
Yeah. Oh, I tell my clients that all the time. I'm like, hey, guess I always make a joke about I don't have a magic wand. Sorry. Oh, technically I do have magic wands in here, but not real ones. But that's what I say. And especially when they come in and they're like, I need to process this breakup or this trauma happened that we need to talk about. We do that. And then when they say there's still work to do, like I still want to be different here or change this part of me. In my mind, like that's where the hard work starts. For me and for them. Like you can come in and we can process, the trauma, the narrative, whatever it is. But when you just say, and I just want to be the best version of me, that's hard and it never stops. Like you're going to wake up every day and do that again. And you're going to wake up every day and make some sort of mistake that you wish that you didn't do and have to forgive yourself and keep moving forward. I'm constantly working on slowing down and thinking before I speak, and especially with clients, like not, jumping forward to assuming I know how to fix this problem. And I don't always do that. Mm-hmm. And I can either beat myself up about it or say, okay, like that's who I am and I made a mistake this time and I'm still continuing to grow in that way. And unfortunately, like I'll have clients be like, how long does that take? And I'm like, oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to keep happening, you know, and we're going to keep pushing through that. You may not need me forever. My goal is that you don't need me forever, but you're never going to wake up and be like, hey, I got this life thing figured out and no relationships in my life are hard because, again, no magic wand.
Yeah, my phrase is always, you got a bad case of being a person.
Yeah, that's good.
And you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
You can't cure it.
Yep.
It's terminal.
Yep. You're human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so much of my work and so much of any therapist work, I think, is just normalizing the things that people go through because
Absolutely.
and I think this is a lot to do with shame, but we convince ourselves that we're the only one that's going through insert problem here.
Sure.
Any problem that there is that we're the only one. Mm-hmm. We are extremely special. Nobody else has gone through it. Yeah. Nobody else could ever understand.
Yeah. Which is actually a really lonely place to be in.
Oh, it's the most lonely place to be.
Yeah, that's why we normalize.
Yeah.
And you're right, and maybe interrupted you, and this is where you were going. Like, the core that runs through almost every issue that we see is shame. Mm-hmm. Like addiction comes from shame in some way or another. Trauma typically triggered some sort of shame that comes up. Relational issues, shame. Like, it's all kind of in that. And to your point before, I love realizing what the gift of shame was. I think is the greatest gift I've ever received. The gift of shame is humility, the ability to say, like, I am human.
I have limits.
Yeah.
Which leads to relationship.
Yes. I can't be all of the things. Yeah. I am enough tattooed on my body. You are enough is on the wall. Like, that word enough. Like, you can't be all the things. You can only be enough of what you have and enough of what you are. And I love that. Sometimes people are like, oh, and I'm like, no, just sit with it. Like, it's so good. Just sit with it. Because it is. It's, the only way to get through that shame is to say, I can't be all the things. Mm-hmm. I can only be what I am.
Yeah. And I'm okay with being what I am. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was saying earlier is like you get to that place of acceptance.
Yeah.
Of your story.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I don't know if I would want to use the supposed to be words just because I feel like for me that would end up, but what if I had done this differently?
Yeah.
If it's not supposed to be that, it's kind of that whole, if there's only one person for everybody,
yeah.
what happens if I make a wrong choice? Does that screw up
what if I don't get on the
pyramid
bus?
Scheme of people?
Yeah.
Because if I choose that person, but they weren't my person, what about the person that was supposed to be with them? And then, I just got to the place, and it, maybe it's a mindfulness thing. I don't know. You just get to the place where you're like, this is the hand I've been dealt.
Yeah.
And I can make the best of it, or I can rage against the machine.
Yeah.
And I don't have that kind of energy anymore. So, what have we missed? Is there anything in the movie that you were drawn to that?
I think, so I love the ending part. Let me go back because I did make sure to make a note, which I think we kind of already covered. I do think it's interesting, and again, hearing it back, but where she talks about, we're single, we get to be good at being alone, which I thought was really interesting. She goes through that whole, this is the moment that we have, and we don't know how long it's going to be, and it could be fleeting and go away. And that's what she says. We're single, we get to be good at being alone, but how good at it do we want to be? So again, it's that, that balance, that push-pull of, we're created for connection. That's not going to go away. I guess there are some people who, end up being hermits and are like, no, I literally don't ever want to be with people. But there is that space of we are looking for connection. We need connection to survive. And then also being okay with that same space of being alone and being by yourself and finding that balance of both of those existing together kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a therapist, being in therapy, it's so natural to want everything to be binary. It's either this or it's the other.
Yes. No, it's the both and. I am living in that space the last few months.
And so for someone to say I've either got to be alone and be okay with it, or I've got to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
You don't have to get rid of your desire for a relationship while you're alone.
Yeah.
You don't have to get rid of your relationship that you're in to need alone time.
Yeah. Yes.
Like both of these things can coexist.
Yeah.
I think it's just all a matter of how connected to your own heart are you? How much are you listening to your feelings, and how much are you allowing your needs to surface through your feelings? Because every feeling leads to a need.
Yeah.
So like if you are feeling, X, and you can identify, oh, this is what I need.
Yeah.
Then whatever it is, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to the point that we started to talk about before we started the podcast was the Meg piece. She was almost so far the opposite way of, being avoidant of relationship and like, no, career, job, that's all I need, and she's right. Like she touches on the, like, people think that you have to give up your dreams to be a mother. Like, again, both and those things can exist together. But she had gone so far the other way of, I don't want anything. I don't need anybody in my life. And I think that's, we talked about, oh, she just had this light bulb pop on and that baby was stinking cute. So I could see how that happens. But I didn't like you said, that it was kind of this like, oh, I think I'll have a baby. Okay, I'm going to have a baby. Like, no, that doesn't feel good. But that sense of like, I don't have to shut out the world, and I can let other people in, and I can have that connection, and again, what does it look like? We didn't get her whole story on. Hopefully she wasn't doing it just to fill this empty need that she had. But did that moment awaken a desire in her that said, like, I do want people in my life with me, and I do want to be a mom, and I do want, to have that peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it seemed like she got to the place of, because it didn't seem like that she had planned on meeting Plop.
Plop. No, she did not.
Yeah.
She did not plan on falling in love with Plop for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like she got to the place of almost like, this is my life, and I can accept it and I can receive it, and I can take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Like,
and again, the magic, I can do this on my own, but I don't want to, like I have proven I can be a successful doctor and have my own place and care for my sister. And I had this intention of raising a baby on my own, and surprise, there you are. And as much as she fights it the whole way through, I mean, she doesn't want to let him in at all. She gives him every excuse not to be there, including not telling him that she's pregnant. That whole scene in the baby
scene
store
where he is walking by and sees her in a window and sees that she's pregnant.
Yes.
I cannot imagine how much internally he was freaking out.
Oh my gosh.
And then when he's like, I'm going to be a dad. Oh, because he
wanted
I'm
it.
dating her.
Yeah.
Like, we've had sex. Like, this kind of thing.
I get to be a stay-at-home dad. That's every man's dream. He is all about that piece of it.
That's funny. Also, with her being a doctor, that could totally be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was on board. So essentially what he was, and here, actually, I did make a note. You just reminded me. I made a note because she is avoidant. She is going to put up every wall, and she is going to try to push him away. He kept showing up. Like, there was a beautiful part of that could be seen one way or the other. Again, if you take it and put it in the context of real world, but he didn't let her push him away. Like, he fought and he was like, okay, crazy, like, go and do your own thing. But then he still showed up when the baby was there.
What was that? What was that thing that she kept repeating the phrase, don't tell a pregnant woman she's crazy.
Yeah, don't tell a pregnant woman she's crazy.
And it felt like it was some element of a plot that didn't, the phrase stayed, but the other plot points didn't.
I think it was just a generic, like, pregnant women have a lot of hormones coursing through their body. Like, you don't tell them that they're crazy because they're already I don't know. I've never been pregnant. They're potentially already feeling crazy. You sure as hell don't call them out on it. And so she'd already said that to her sister. And so then when it came full circle and he's just blowing it off, like, I don't know, it's just crazy, whatever. And then that's when she loses it. And you hear the lady in the background. She's like, get it, girl. Like, she's supporting her, having no idea that she really did just go off the rails. And this poor guy's just trying to catch up. I love that whole scene.
Yeah. Lucy's story
Yeah.
ends up with her not being by herself.
Correct.
She is reading to a group of kids
Mm-hmm.
at a library or a store or something.
And breaks down, but you have to back up to the breakdown. She thought she found her peanut. And again, hers like almost that anxious of like, I found him. I'm going to hold on really tight. And he's like, whoa, I thought we're cool because we're dating other people.
He's getting on a train in Grand Central Station. She has a parting gift, like it's a game show.
Yes,
she has a
gift
as he's.
Well, she made him a sandwich and a bagel.
Yeah. And it's a photo album of the past 3 weeks, which I think is the total of their relationship.
I think so too, 3 weeks.
And he's like, whoa. So he.
Yeah. He wasn't in it anyways.
Yeah, not just ends it, but he had been seeing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's just at this place of, which I get this, she understood things being her life as being one way, and then is like clued in like, oh no, that's not the way.
Yeah.
So probably there was this weird like foundational earthquake that happened where her understanding of how her life worked.
Yes. And what she says in her meltdown later in front of these poor children is she talks about, so your happy ending gets ripped away from you and then you fixate on your mistakes, which I thought we don't see that part, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's what we do. Like she had the earthquake, she had everything kind of flip upside down on its own, and she fixated on what did I do wrong.
That's the regrets versus the acceptance thing.
Yes. Yeah. As opposed to stepping back and being like, well, he's a jerk because he said online dating is for hooking up, and she says it's to find your soulmate, and it echoes through the whole train station. Like they clearly were on two different paths looking for two different things. And instead of accepting that, it became I'm fixating on my mistakes. I, squeezed myself into my Spanx and put all the hair on my head and took it off of everywhere else. And, goes into that whole breakdown in front of these poor children.
Yeah. And then she does the new girl thing where she's like trying to cut the Spanx because he's
off of her.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Jason Mantzoukas walks in.
Yeah. George.
Who is like, I guess the guy that manages that space or whatever. And
we're going to have you sign something, parents, before you leave.
Yeah. And she ends up ending up with him. At the end.
Yeah.
They show up at the birthday party together. They see Tom. I mean, and this is something that I just think is so interesting, is that for whatever reason in the world of the movie, which we get a little tiny slice of the entire world, but like in the world of the movie, he and her just worked. So when they got together, it just fit. And yeah, she's anxiously attached, and yeah, she is trying to control everything and that kind of thing. But for whatever reason, him and her, it just worked out.
Well, and we see a little bit, and same, again, we're not seeing the whole picture because it is a movie. And like I said, it's kind of, for me, it's two profound things that are sandwiching this ridiculousness, because there's the whole scene with how they like play this joke on Tom, and you're like, that's mean. And this guy's kind of crazy in the way that he's talking to him, but you're like, oh, like they both, okay, it works because they both have this really quirky, like, love you, just kidding, ha ha ha, like this weird sense of humor that they clearly got in the Clover bra and whatever, like they clearly, there was something about them that connected and worked, even though I don't know that she would have checked off all the points on her list.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, oh, yeah. Hardly any.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, maybe
worked.
it was in her moment of breakdown in the middle of that place and how he responded.
Yeah.
It just kind of opened up something.
Yeah. Well, he kind of held her crazy. Talk about being seen and understood. Like, I think that's what he says. You just reminded me. Like, he's like, whoa, okay, calm down. Like, I have to deal with these parents now. That was a little crazy and also kind of awesome. Like, he actually parallels those together. And that's when she's like, oh, like, somebody's looking at my crazy and saying it was kind of cool, and I can be okay with that, which in the end was maybe what she needed.
Yeah. I think that's something that I love the most about hearing so many different people's stories of their relationships.
Yeah.
Is it's those, and it's something that I always ask if I've got a couple that's in for premarital, is like, what do you love about them? What is it that made you want to shift from friends to dating?
Yeah.
Like, what were those little things that whenever you noticed them made you go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I love hearing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's taking in those details about a person that ends up making that person special to you.
Absolutely.
And what's special to one person might not be to the other, and vice versa. And I think that is something that in the most unhealthy times of my singledom, you know, I would have said, I just want a relationship, you know, but looking back, you know, if I could sit 30-year-old me in front of 38-year-old me, which is me in the present, I would say it's not about finding a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
It's about finding a good one.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to just plop you don't need a body.
Yeah.
You don't want to just fill the seat next to you.
Ew.
Because, and this is actually something, somebody else brought this up sometime soon in my life, talking about how people will say, oh yeah, marriage, relationships are such tough work. Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think there's certain parts, like you end up learning how to argue.
Yeah.
Like, so you don't pull out those bullets
Yes.
of, you know, and just, you know, hit something really deep really soon.
Yeah.
But it's not just tough work.
Yeah.
That's almost the exception.
Yeah.
Where if you can find that person that appreciates those weird things about you, it just ends up being, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like somebody really digs all of the, what my best man at our wedding called quirks.
Yeah.
Which he was saying, Josh has quirks. And then he paused and he's like, he has a lot of quirks. And I was like, isn't this supposed to be a good speech?
Yeah.
Like a speech where it's talking about how nice I am?
Yeah.
Roast, that'd have been funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you said that you felt seen in those therapy sessions, one of the things that Leigh-Ann has that I just knew, like, this is her, is that Leigh-Ann made me feel loved as Josh, not loved in a general love.
Yeah.
Like, I have felt loved in general ways by people, like the pastor at your church.
Sure.
Feel loved in a general way by the pastor at the church.
Yeah.
But in the way that he's supposed to love everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But like the first birthday that I celebrated being with Leigh-Ann, she had come up with this whole like surprise day. I love and am obsessed with corgis. Like, they are my favorite.
Okay.
We're going to get one. It hasn't happened yet. Whatever. Follow a ton of them on Instagram.
Yes.
She tracked down one that I follow on Instagram that's in Nashville, contact the owner, surprised me by taking me to the dog park where they met me, and I got to play with that corgi on my birthday.
Oh my gosh.
And like later on, not later on that day, but like later on, she was like, was that okay? I just felt like, I don't know if this is enough. And I was like, you literally made a dream of mine come true that I didn't even know was possible to come true. Like, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I could meet a corgi I follow on Instagram.
Right.
And Leigh-Ann made that happen. Yes. And I was like, I really did say this. I was like, I've never felt more known in my whole life.
Yes. Yes.
And so, you know, just to know that a person sees you.
Yeah. That is, gifts are my love language. And I always say, like, I say that proudly because it could be like, oh God, that sounds really shallow and materialistic. Gifts are my love language if you see me, if you know me. And I usually I tell people gifts are my love language, and then I follow it up with this story.
Like thoughtful gifts.
Thoughtful gifts. So I had just started my private practice right out of grad school, so no money, right? Like, you've been there, you know what that looks like. And I was living in like a mother-in-law style apartment. I had just moved. Because of the way our grad school program, it was only a 2-year program, and it was new. They were figuring out, and they were like, oh, P.S., you guys can't work while you're doing this program. And we all were like, oh my gosh. And luckily I was fortunate enough. I love my parents. My parents are great people, and I was able to move back in without, anyone killing anybody, which is always good. So I had just moved out of their house back into like adulthood again. And I was shopping with my mom, and I needed a toilet brush, like a toilet brush cleaner. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. Like, this one's $2.99, but the one that's like in the carrier that I actually want is like $6. That's insane. I'm not paying the $4 difference. That's so dumb. So I get the one. I was like, I guess I'll just put it in a Target bag, like being very dramatic about, this brush doesn't have a carrier to be in. I think like a week later, she was like, hey, I got something in the back seat for you. And I opened it, and she had bought me the $6 one that had the container that it said. And I was like, thank you. Like, she got why that was annoying to not, like, first world problem, to not have a thing to put it in. And she got why I was saving the $4. And her and my dad have done great for themselves. And so they could spare the $4 to make it a little bit easier. It's those moments of like, I see you and I know what's going on for you. I get why this matters to you. I get that you love this corgi, whatever it is. Like, those are the moments where you're like, okay, you get it. You know me. You see me. And I love what you were saying. Like, I reflect back, and I hope this doesn't sound whatever. Like, yes, I could have been in a relationship over the last 7 years. I easily could have, you know, decided, oh, okay, that's cool. We went on a date and it was okay. Yeah, I could have ended up with, you know, you're a terrible therapist, babies in dangerous places guy. Because, yeah, I just wanted the person next to me. But I've known since that breakup that that's not what I wanted. You know, I did want that. I did want to feel truly seen and understood. And it's funny that you say that, because I think through, I know what my flaws are. I know what's hard about me. And it's not that I like want to be with a guy that doesn't bring that side out in me. But I want to be with a guy that's going to be able to be like, okay, hey, you're in that space where you're clearly saying things that you don't mean. And I can be a little mean sometimes. Like, so I'm going to let you do that. And I'm going to walk away. And I still love you in this. But I know what you need right now. And I'm going to give that to you. Not somebody that I have to pretend to be somebody else with. But that's going to be like, hey.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing, though, is that there's no way to find that out without getting down in the dirt.
I know. I honestly feel bad because that, like, at the point that I actually meet somebody that I'm like, oh, this could be something, I'm going to be like, so therapy, had couples, we got some time? Like, let's go talk about things. Because it, you know, like, you just know those things. And I think, I don't know.
I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I mean, Dak Shepard talks about on his podcast that him and Kristen went to therapy from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and there were people ask me, they're like, what are you looking for? Do you have a type? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, honestly, all I know is that it's going to have to be somebody that's okay with therapy. A, because it's what I do and I want to be supported in that. And B, they're going to have to be willing to talk the talk, you know, and not be therapist all of the time, but that can say, you know, understands shame and vulnerability and cares about the Enneagram, you know, things like that, that seems silly. But it's how I've learned to do.
Well, it doesn't seem silly because that is the language and the framework that you've built for you to understand the world.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, people out there that aren't therapists, they have frameworks, they have worldviews, and that's how they understand the world.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to be in intimate relationship with somebody who can't speak that language.
Right.
And that's true across the board.
Yeah.
It's just that you happen to be a therapist.
Yeah.
And so somebody else, and that doesn't mean that they have to be a therapist. That just means that they're probably going to have to be a little more on the self-aware side, a little more on the I know my issues side, and I've done my work side.
Yeah. I'm open to therapy.
Somebody that's blissfully unaware and is not in connection with themselves isn't going to make the team.
Yeah. I had I don't know if you know Laura Ramey, but she did, sure she does, I think she still does a group supervision that's purely IFS. Like, it's therapist supervision, but from an IFS lens. It's amazing. And so you quickly kind of get to know the people around it, and you talk from an IFS space. And I cannot remember exactly the context. I remember key points, and I don't remember the context. That's how it works. I don't remember the context of this, but I think I was in one of those, I don't know that I'm good enough therapist, like staffing one of those, like, this is hard, I don't know how I'm feeling about me space. And another therapist there said, I'm noticing that I have a part that's showing up that really wants to, like, speak into that for you. And he said some very nice things. And I said back, like, there's a part of me that can accept that. And then a part of me that's really struggling with this other part. And, like, we kind of went back and forth like that for a little bit. And then both just sat back, and I was like, that was the best conversation ever. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous if you were listening to it on the outside, because it was this part needs to say this and this part is showing up. And if you don't know IFS, that's the whole point, is we have all these parts of us that show up and whatever. And it's helpful to speak from them, or no, what do? You speak for them, not from them. So being able to say,
or you speak to them sometimes.
But yeah, so being able to say, like, I feel really anxious right now is different than I can't handle what's going on. So anyway, so we had this whole conversation around that. And I was like, oh my gosh, if we all walked around and had conversation like that, that would be so beautiful. And, like, that's what I'm looking for, is somebody that's willing to be having those types of conversations.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, so like even though Leigh-Ann's not a therapist, she's a social worker.
Oh, yeah.
Like somebody at her work said to her sometime in the past, I don't know, month, like, oh, your husband's a marriage therapist? Oh my gosh, like he must get every single thing right. And
Oh, gosh.
like, and I said, and you told them I did, right?
Because that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, even with two people that are in the helping relationships field, we still have arguments. We
Oh,
still have
yeah.
fights.
Just because, human.
Yeah, and the way that therapy works, the way that therapists work and can help is that we're unbiased because we're not in it.
Right.
And
we're the biggest hypocrites around.
Yeah, like with our own relationships, we're in it. So it's a bit like you're too close to the picture to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because your biases are blocking you, your story's blocking you.
Absolutely.
I think the thing though that I appreciate and love so much about our relationship though is, to use a phrase from Terry Murphy, you know, two people when put close together are going to hurt each other. It's a given. The hurt matters less than the repair that happens after.
Absolutely.
And so no matter what the hurt is, you know, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the two of us on our team, one of us or both, is going to circle back.
Yeah.
And even if we're still in a place where we don't think necessarily we did something wrong, I think we've both realized that in a relationship, it's not a matter of what is technically right or wrong. If it hurt your partner, it's wrong.
Absolutely.
So like I could have done something that is morally, legally, situationally, you know, whatever, right. But if Leigh-Ann felt hurt by it, then I hurt my wife.
Yeah.
And that is right or wrong.
Right.
Something that I want to circle back and just say, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like I would never mean to hurt you. Can we talk about it? Because I don't want it to happen again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so just that commitment to stewarding each other's heart.
Yeah. Repair is everything.
Yeah.
I teach that to parents too. Like one of the best things that you can do for your kids is like, hey, guess what? You're going to blow up at your kids. You're going to, you know, talk about therapists can be hypocrites, or we're the non-bias, you know, so it's different when we're on the other side. I saw this recently and I was like, this is going to be my new motto. I'm the perfect parent because I don't have kids yet. And so I've started telling my parents that. But in that, one of the things that I teach them is you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be human. All these other things that we've already talked about. And so the growth for you and for your kid isn't in like, oh, I lost my temper, let me just act like everything's okay. It's being able to go back and owning and saying like, hey, it's not okay that you hit your brother. I should not have responded that way, and I apologize, but here's what we need to do. Like, I'm repairing with you, and here's what we need to do together to fix this. And in the same way, I have them teach their kids that. I don't teach empty apologies. Like, you don't just go tell your brother you're sorry because I'm sorry, you know, leads to all that stuff. But how do you heal the hurt is typically what I actually have the kids go through a process of interviewing the family of what makes you feel better when you've been hurt. So that they go, because for some people, again, it's a love language
That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah. Because some people it is, if you genuinely tell me that you're sorry, that feels better to me because words of affirmation are my love language. Or I'm your sibling. I don't really care what you have to say.
Have you had anybody say a $20 bill?
Not yet.
Because that would help.
Not yet. Not yet. Surprisingly, actually. But yeah, but a lot of times it's like, do a chore for me, you know, or whatever it is. But yeah, that would help. Just give me $20. But so it's going through that process of learning from an early age. You're going to make mistakes. The important part is how you heal that. And healing looks like giving that person, seeing that person, understanding that person, and meeting their need.
And I like that it communicates that the person who has been hurt's feelings matter.
Yes.
Because I think that, like, I mean, I don't know if this can be attributed to any part of my personality, but for so long in my life, I literally thought, well, other people's feelings matter more than mine. And so in a way, you're not just teaching the offending party how to apologize, but you're teaching the offended party that their feelings matter, and it's okay to ask for what they need.
Yes. I
It's
think
okay
that's a
to
goal
ask,
for every one
like,
of my clients.
this is, I feel hurt, and this is what I need to feel like we're connected again.
Yes. Yeah, because you saying sorry, whether it sounds like you mean it or not, if that's not speaking to what I need, then I have no voice in this. I just have to, you know, pretend to forgive you whether I want to or not.
And I think an apology is going to be a part of it no matter what.
Absolutely.
But, I mean,
I'm doing this because I'm showing that I feel bad.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so let's say that, oh, nope. I'm forgetting the last question.
The last question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a new question, so it's not quite in the rotation yet.
Yeah.
But what is something that you have learned from your clients?
Yeah, that's a way harder question than all the other ones. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because I learn from my clients every day, and the ones that.
Well, I didn't know if it was something that you've learned from a client would be tougher than something you learned from your clients.
Yeah. Oh, definitely your clients for sure.
Yeah, because you try to like encapsulate all into one thing.
Yeah.
So maybe what's the latest thing? I don't know.
I think so. I did. You threw this at me last night, so luckily I did have time to think about it. And so normally, like when I have something, like something pops up in my head, and I'm like, and I was like, whoa, I have like nothing popping up. And then I started thinking about compassion, and I was like, ooh, I think that's what it is. I think the thing my clients have most taught me is compassion, and then taking that another level, even more so self-compassion. I think in general, doing this work, you're reminded every day of the story behind what's going on. We talk about, you never know what happened to the person at the grocery store in front of you that cut you in line or, cut you off in traffic. And it's hard to live in that space. I'm not going to pretend like that's easy, but remembering like, God, there's a lot of really hard stories out there. And so having that compassion, and then a step beyond that, in the vein of everything that we've talked about today, the importance of that self-compassion piece. And even for me personally, our jobs are so intertwined personally with who we are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I still do this. I feel like I've grown in some ways. When a client walks out the door, I'm judging who I am as a person based on how I felt that session went, which is not a super healthy thing. And I've made some progress in that, in the work that I've done with clients, of like, oh wow, hey, self-compassion is actually really important. I'm working on a certification right now, and so I'm having to do videos and watch yourself back, which is always like a blessing and a curse. And so, yeah, like I could sit there and I could nitpick like, oh, I didn't pick up on that thing that they said, or I felt like I derailed that, but that, great, you can't go back and change the past. And so just leaning into that space again of all of those things, shame, humility, all of that, and saying I can't be all of the things, so all I can do is turn inward and be kind to myself and be kind to other people, remembering that they have stories. So yeah, I think that's the main chunk of that stood out for me.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, gotta be nice to ourselves,
Yeah. So let's say that somebody was listening to today's episode and they felt like they could connect with you really well, and they wanted to see you as a client, or maybe even bring their kid to see you as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I'd absolutely do both. I actually just finished up. I'm a registered play therapist as well as a licensed marriage and family therapist. The important part of that is that I actually don't do marriage. I do family and kids. I don't do couples counseling. It just wasn't my strong. I didn't have a guide towards following that piece of it. But yeah, so I've seen as young as 2 and as old as 62. I don't typically work with adult men. So as far as, referral things, definitely kids, definitely teenagers, and then adult women. And do experiential work with my adults, which I really like. We do some sand tray and things like that. And so you can just find me on my website, jennymatern.com. You can email me straight through there, and any questions that you have about anything, or even any feedback on this, you want to talk about being single, great, let's do it. But yeah, that's the main way to find me, probably the easiest way to find me.
Cool. And we'll have links to all that stuff in the episode description.
Yeah.
Jenny, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. So tell me what you thought about today's show.
It was so great. I think the movie was really cute, and I really, like, as soon as you told me what movie it was going to be, I got real excited, because I just think, like, being single. I was single.
I was going to say, which you're not?
No, but I remember being single, and like that, like the pressure to be in a relationship. And I also there's times even now, like, as a married person, I treasure my time as a single person. And there's a lot of times that I would have maybe said, like, I wish I had more time. Not, you know what I mean? I'm glad that we're married, and I didn't want to wait longer to get married, but like, I just had some really good times when I was single. And I feel like that's just an important, I don't know. I just think people, not, I don't know if look down on is the right way to put it, but singleness is just looked at in a lot of, maybe
It seems like
not
it's
as-
something to be tolerated rather than appreciated.
Yeah. So anyways, I was excited that you guys talked about it. And
Yeah.
then you guys had just a great little talk. I love listening to these.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that I remember is when you guys were talking about, well, the whole thing was about like singleness and dating and stuff. But she made a comment along the lines of, at the end of the day, all you have is yourself. And then you said right after that like your relationship with yourself is the foundation for any other relationship. And I really love that. Like, I love that. And I just think it's just important. Like, and again, like, I don't want to repeat too much because you guys did talk about it, but like, being single is the chance to get to know yourself and to like do things that you love and become just really solid in who you are. And that leads to the best type of relationships, I feel like. Well, I shouldn't say that, I guess, because there's people who are with like, the same person from like high school on, and that's great too. But there's just, you got to like form an identity. And I think in any relationship, in any healthy relationship, there's two separate identities of the person.
Yeah.
So I think like it is just really important to have your own identity separate from another person.
Yeah, I think that one thing I would add in is, singleness is not. I think I typically have heard language. It's a time to discover yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I really like that language though, because it seems a bit passive to me. I would rather, or I should say, I would prefer the language. It's a time to create yourself. It's a time to build yourself.
Oh yeah. I
Like you
that.
get to have a voice in who you become. You get to decide what type of person do I want to be? Do I want to be a person who has an active involvement in my development, in my identity? Or do I want to be the type of person who has this value system or that value system? But you get to decide those things, and you get to practice those things and live them out. And by doing that, you develop, you construct an identity so that whenever you do enter into a relationship, which I mean, I think, so many of us could fall into this trap. The relationship doesn't become your identity, so that if it doesn't work out, you don't lose yourself.
Yeah. 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 Retweet. Plus, I think I was thinking the whole time about how in the South, I think it's a thing that like getting married younger is more of an expectation and more of the norm. And like singleness is looked at as a phase. Like, oh, you just have to, do this while you're single so that, when you get in a relationship, you can do this. Does that make sense? Like it's like singleness is always a stepping stone. And I don't think that it has to be. And I think that that's something that frustrates me. Of course, this is easy for me to say being married, but like, I don't know. I just think it doesn't have to be a stepping stone. It's just your life. Like nobody's life looks the same. And I know there can be like some loneliness. And 100%, I mean, I get that. And I had loneliness too. I don't know. I think that's also tough. Like the loneliness is tough, like dealing with the singleness on your own, but then hearing it talked about as if it's like a condition. Oh, you're still single. Like you just have to be patient, or you just have to do this while you're single or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't love that. And I think that that's a perspective or like a way of looking at singleness that I would love if that changed,
Yeah.
if it wasn't talked about in that way so much.
Well, I don't think that the expectation of a person having a certain order to their life is out of bounds. Like, I don't think that expecting a person to go through a period of time being single in their early 20s, mid 20s, and then getting married and then having children. I mean, for however long there have been humans and however long there's been marriage, that's been the way that things tend to go. So, I mean, that's a typical, and I know that culturally that may have even been something that was required. And I know that, like, you know, when we did the episode on, I almost said Sense and Sensibility, but that's not it. It's Pride and Prejudice. When we did the episode on Pride and Prejudice, we even talked about how in that culture, you know, getting married was a way that they could ensure that their daughters were provided for and fed and sheltered. I think that I'm appreciating everything you're saying. I think that the danger in having that as an expectation or even a norm or a typical is when, if a person doesn't meet that expectation, they're looked down upon.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a norm, because that just happens, but like, it's just like anything else in life. The norm was to be heterosexual for a certain amount of, you know, for a long time, but like, and if anything was out of the norm, it was looked down on or shamed or something like that. And like, that's a terrible example. But I guess I just mean, like, it's not whether or not there's a norm. It's the way that the out of the norm is talked about and like referred to and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, you talked about, like, a couple times, you talked about how, and you say this a lot, if you had met me like one day before you did, you wouldn't have been ready. And I was thinking, like, even then, you know, we met and we didn't start dating like, I don't even, how long was it? Because you started at Starbucks.
Well, we met in November of 13.
And we didn't start dating, well, officially until February of 16.
Yeah.
Even though, you guys, we were like talking on the phone and stuff before that. We were basically dating. But yeah, like, even then, I guess, like, my point in that was just, you said if we met a day before we did, we wouldn't have ended up together.
Oh, no, I said I don't know if we would have ended up together.
Yeah. And like, even after that, there was time where we knew each other, you know, not in the context of dating. And that there's nothing to that. Like, that's, I think either way is good.
Well, in fairness, you were with somebody else for a lot of that time. So that it's not like the opportunity was there obstacle. That once we met, we could have gotten together.
Oh, that sounds terrible. I didn't think we weren't like, whatever.
Dig that hole. What are you talking about?
No, I'm just saying, like, that I was dating somebody else, and then after we broke up, I didn't break up to be with you, but it just worked out that way. And it worked out well.
I don't know if anybody was thinking that.
Well, it just sounds weird to be like, well, when we met, you were with somebody else, and then whatever. It sounded weird in my head. I just wanted to clarify there was no crossing of lines.
I want to let you keep going.
There was no crossing of lines, and both of us have always remained faithful to the person that we're with, and that's all. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. The whole point of that was just to say, like, I wouldn't, even when we met, I wouldn't have been ready. Like, for me, there was a lot that I had to go through and, like, was going through when you met me. And so I just had that thought, like, when I heard you guys say that over and over, I thought, oh, yeah. And even, like you said, if you would have met me a day earlier, you don't know. If I would have been in any other situation, I don't know if we would have ended up together. And we might have, but we certainly wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't have the depth of understanding of my own heart if it had been, you know, if you and I had gotten together, like dating any earlier than we did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I forgot why I brought that up, but
same.
I did. I think the last thing, no, not the last thing. No, it is the last thing. just
So I hear you saying that this may be the
well,
final thing.
I think I several times just thought like about the thing that we just talked about, like how dating is like sometimes seems like a purgatory that you have to go through to get in a relationship, and that's just not true. Like, I don't know. That's all. We already talked about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, before we started recording, I think when I was on the phone with you this afternoon, you brought up something that I said on the podcast and my phrasing of it. And that was, I said, when we got serious, I was so thankful that I didn't have to date again.
Yes. This is reminding me. And that made me think. And then you guys did go back and forth and share some horror stories of dating and like why it's terrible.
Do you have any horror stories from dating?
I didn't really casually date. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I had some relationships, but I didn't like casually date. So I have terrible dating stories, like terrible stories from being in a terrible relationship and others that are just fine. But like I didn't go on dates. So I don't have any good date stories. Yours was really good though. And hers was really good. Oh my gosh. The baby's in danger. Ooh. I'm glad that she's not with
Babies
that guy.
in dangerous places.
Yeah, such a strange niche of art to want to make.
Although in an effort to raise money for the podcast, we have made that calendar. So if you click the link in the bio, you'll be able to buy one for the coming year.
Good news. Anyway, so
this episode is brought to you by Babies in Dangerous Places. Babies in dangerous places. They're infants, but they're in danger.
Yeah. So all of that to say, and again, this is not to minimize because I know that dating can be terrible, and there have been multiple times with you and me that we've seen a movie or we've seen a show or something, and that I have felt thankful to not have to go through that first, the first phases of a relationship again. But also I hope and I think that there's people out there who have fun doing it, and that the point of dating can almost be to find out more about yourself, and it is learning about what your preferences are and stuff like that, and learning what you can work with. And I don't know, I feel really what's the word, not pretentious, but I know this is easy to say from somebody who just admitted that she never really casually dated and is currently married, but I just thought that maybe there should be a little.
Bow down to the queen, everybody.
No, that's not what I meant at all. I just meant it's kind of like me speaking on something that I don't know anything about. I'm just acknowledging that I don't have firsthand experience. But I do know that even from the relationships that I've been in, some stuff is just learning, and you get great stories. And I just thought that there should be a little add-in of it also sounds like it could be fun, and you get free meals. And
I want to talk for a second about what I mean a little bit more by, if I'd have met you one day earlier, we may not have ended up together. Mm-hmm. There were many, I recognized from the beginning that you were special and somebody that I wanted to have a different kind of relationship than I had had before with.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I recognized, there's the old adage, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that if I approached my relationship with you in the same way that I had with other people, that statistically it wouldn't be successful. So there was a lot of things that I did that I had not done before, that I believe, because of my past relationships and because of the therapy that I had, allowed me to interact and relate with you in a different way. I mean, I've heard you tell the story before about how I think texted you before you moved away and said something like, hey, I've just really loved talking with you no, I'm getting it wrong.
You're getting it almost right. You called me on the phone and we just talked on the phone, which was super weird. And then almost
it's
a couple.
A lot of people, when they're on the phone, they talk.
I know, but you didn't call me to ask a question. You called me just to talk to me.
Yeah.
And it was a couple days after I had moved to New York. And then like a couple of hours after that, that's when you texted me. So I was already in New York,
Yeah,
but you said,
but I texted you and said that I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I'm really sad that it came so late
yeah,
as to us moving away.
mm-hmm.
And it was just, in my head at the time, it was just saying how I felt
Mm-hmm.
and being intentional about saying it and communicating that, hey, like, this has really meant a lot to me, and I'm really sad that it couldn't have come sooner when we were in person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that in any relationship before that I would have done. I've literally said before, you know, oh, well, I have to keep my cards close to my chest. And that was just out of fear of being vulnerable. And so I think, you know, in the relationship with you, because of the work I had done, while I was still afraid of being vulnerable, because vulnerability is literally exposing,
Yeah,
you know, your
scary.
true self, being open to rejection, I wasn't as afraid.
Yeah.
Or I was okay with if it didn't go my way.
Yeah.
I knew I would still be okay.
Yeah. And I think something that I did in that moment is that A, was really difficult, but B, it was different than past relationships. And I think is difficult just in general, from the people that I've talked to who are still in dating. I took that text and then immediately I thought, oh my gosh, this dude wants to date me. He's trying to date me. I can't do this. Like I'm
wrong.
dealing with some stuff. I had relatively recently gotten out of that relationship. Like that's why it was so close to when we moved that you and I started talking. And I you know, freaked out about it for a little bit. And then I remember in a conversation with my mom, she said, or my mom and dad together, I think actually said, they basically just reminded me, like, take it for what it is. Like, read the text message. He didn't say, I think that we should date and we should continue talking and we should do this and this and this and we should, you know, whatever. He said, I really like talking to you and I'm sad this happened right as we moved away. And you had said, excited about the possibility of seeing you in Nashville in December. Cause I would come here every year with my family. So it was just, it was a good moment for me. And I think one of the first times that I just thought, okay, I'm not going to analyze. I'm not going to try to like figure out or like read between the lines. I'm just going to take you for what you said because everything that you've shown me so far has shown me that I can trust you. And so I'm just going to like go off of that. And also I'm just going to focus on doing what I need to do for myself and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And that worked out really well.
Yeah. So I think in both cases, you know, because of the work we had done, we were able to do something different than what we may have traditionally chosen. And as a result, we achieved a different result.
Yeah. I think this is a good spot to put in the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which I've sort of said already, but like, I just recognize and feel weird about the fact that we're married and we're talking about singleness. And I think I have been feeling this sometimes.
Hey, I was single for a long
I know,
time. I had plenty of experience.
You had more experience than I have, but like, it is really weird for me to be the married person when I talk to my friends about like people they're dating or like if like I have a couple coworkers who are on like dating apps. And I think sometimes in those conversations, I just become really aware that like, oh, I am the married person now. And like, I certainly like, I think empathizing with people is one of my, it's one of the things I do best. But like to a certain extent, it's just different because you and I we're in a relationship and we're married to each other and we don't go home to an empty house or like, we don't have to do the whole messaging back and forth on a dating app. I just don't want to speak on something as if we're the ultimate experts because we ended up getting married when we're still learning and, you know.
We're just doing our best.
Yeah, we're doing our best.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that stuck out to you?
I don't think so.
Okay. So how to be single. Rent, buy, or pass?
Personally, for me, it's a rent, but I could see it being a buy if you want like a cute like chick flick to have on hand for a girls' night or just like a treat yourself night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is good.
Let me ask you this. Would you go How to Be Single or would you go Girls Trip?
Oh, How to Be Single, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh. I would definitely pick that
100% less Tiffany Haddish.
Yeah, but 100% more like it has its heartfelt moments, and you know how I love a good heartfelt moment.
Eyes of You song.
That's
Oh
what I'm
my
talking about. I
gosh.
know.
That didn't even belong in this movie. It was too pure and sweet and good. Well, this is a pretty good place to call it a day. So I think that for this episode, we're going to go ahead and raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that at least for this week, the theater is closed.